This is Richard Wolff from Democracy at Work, responding to another Ask Prof. Wolff question from our Patreon community. This question comes from Karen, and beside thanking her for sending us the question, I wanted to commend her for the way she set it up. What she did was to say that she gathers from my presentations that I don't think capitalists are particularly greedy, more or less than anybody else, that they do what they do as leaders of enterprises in a capitalist system because that's the way the system works. They get rewarded for certain kinds of behavior, they get punished for other kinds, and they act accordingly. What Karen does is then take the question another step and says, do I think, she asks, that politicians are to be understood in the same way, that they're not particularly good guys, bad guys, or anything like that. They are playing according to the rules of their system, the way the CEO and boards of directors are in capitalist enterprises. The short answer to Karen's question is yes, I do think it's almost literally a parallel situation, and let me explain. Politicians, and by that we mean the general run of Republicans and Democrats here in the United States, since those two parties operate a virtual political monopoly in our country. I do believe most of them are not more or less greedy than anybody else. They have the same array of personal characteristics that the general population does, more or less. I think what they're doing, though, is acting out in the way the system works. And by that, I mean the following. We have a government, which is what the politicians operate, a government. We have a government of a capitalist economic system. And what that means is that the discretionary wealth, what the corporations call profit, is in their hands. We all work to produce the profits, but they get them. We get a wage. They get all the rest of the value we produce when we work. They get the profits into their hands. And that enables them to make themselves very wealthy because they take a healthy chunk of the profits we all produce for them. They take it for themselves. The richest people in the United States are not the athletes or the movie stars that you hear about. They are the run-of-the-mill top of the corporate empire, the people who pay themselves on average these days $10-20 million a year. That's the core of our wealthy population. And their immediate vice CEOs and all the rest of it. And they use that money to control the government. They always have. They don't want to pay taxes. They use their power to keep the taxes on them low. They want to shift the burden of taxes from themselves to the mass of the population. They've done that forever. That's the way the system works. And it has real consequences. One of them is that the corporate leadership, the people they make our rich fellow citizens, have the wealth, the profits they get. They don't take it all for themselves. They use part of it, for example, to grow the business. They use another part of it to purchase the political system that services them. And how do they do that? I think most of you know. They donate. They are the big donors to this or that candidate, to this or that political party. They don't just donate for each political race. They do that. But they also buy an army of what are called lobbyists who literally work with the elected officials throughout the time of their governmental service, giving them ideas, suggestions, maybe some threats about what to do politically. And the politicians all understand that's literally where their bread is buttered. They have to do what the corporations and those whom they enrich want. because they know what will happen if they don't. If they turn against those politicians, the politicians will give money instead to their political enemies. In one case, it'll be to this candidate running in the primary against that one, or it's to this candidate running in the general election against that one. You cannot afford to oppose your donors because you will be gone. I can't tell you how many offices of leading politicians in this country I have sat in personally, having the person, elected official, tell me, look, I agree with you. I would like to do what you're suggesting. But if I do, I'm out of here. And I will be replaced by someone who won't even meet with you to hear what you have to say. And you know something? I don't like to hear it, but I understand what they're telling me. And I know that it's roughly the truth. Now, sometimes it happens that politicians disagree, or politicians face a corporate rich population that disagrees. That will sometimes give a little wiggle room to a politician. Let me give you an example. There are many in the United States who want to cut the United States off from its relationship economically with China because they think it will advantage them. But in case you're not familiar, let me assure you that there are many forces in the United States who want the exact opposite. They want more trade with China because they're profiting from it in enormously important for them ways. So there's a conflict here. That gives the politician a little wiggle room. The politician will check who's got the more money to give me, who's got the more support to give or take from me, and then go accordingly. But it's a little bit of wiggle room. But here's what is generally not available in our politics: a position for a politician to really go against the capitalists of the donor class. He can't. She can't. You see it very graphically in environmental or ecological issues of climate change, of global warming, all of that. Because there, most capitalists kind of agree. They don't want regulations. They don't want anything that costs them money. They don't want any interference in what's profitable for them. And so they will use their money to buy the politicians that allow them to block for as long as possible regulations to help the environment. If they can't block them, delay them for decades. When that is exhausted, go into the Congress of the United States or the state houses and buy the repeal of the legislation. And when all of that doesn't work, and all of that means decades and decades in which they can continue to pollute or whatever else they're doing, then when finally they can't prevent a law, they can make sure it isn't administered by the government, again, using their political power, or they evade it by having the laws rewritten so they can do something that they couldn't do before. Until and unless you have in the United States a real political opposition that is an opposition to capitalism and to the capitalists, then politicians, if they have that alternative to use, to rely on, to ally with, then we'll be able to see a different story of behavior from what we have seen. If conversations like this strike you as variable and as valuable, please help us. Share this video with others who might be interested. It's a way of extending the reach of such perspectives as we've just articulated. And we ask you to do that alongside of visiting our website, getting on our mailing list so we and you can communicate on a regular basis. And of course, if you can help with some of the financial costs of doing all of this, that will be greatly appreciated as well. Thank you.